This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Monday, May 8th, 2006, and this is episode number 97 of Walt Disney World Today. I'm Matt Hodgeberg from mgmstudios.org. On today's panel is a man who is not afraid to show up a 60-year-old woman in a race, Mike Scopa of MousePlanet.com. Welcome, Mike.
This area is being refurbished for your future engine. and I'll get to that
sort
later.
of apropos now, but
yeah.
Right.
Also on the panel today is the head of the I Love Dumbo Ride fan club, Len Testa of TouringPlans.com. Welcome, Len.
It's just scary, Matt. How's it going?
Outstanding.
Outstanding, of course.
And on today's show, we're talking about Future World and Epcot. We're going to go around Future World and give us our opinions on all of Future World.
We're going to give us our opinions on Future World?
All right, let's give us our
Excellent.
Listen, I don't need English grammar lessons in the middle of the podcast, okay?
Matt, Cinco de Mayo's over. I hope somebody...
That's right, really. Put the tequila away for next year. Jeez.
All right, well, let's start off in the good old Circle of Life in the Land Pavilion.
Are we going alphabetically?
Yeah, I figure, since I'm now Mr. English over here, grammar, spelling.
Mr. Language person?
Yeah, right. Person thingy. Me like Ingy. So Circle of Life, the attraction that I've heard many times on Mouse World Radio, but I've never actually ridden. I figured that was enough for me. I heard it.
Well, it's a film, there's no actually moving parts, sort of like the hydrolators, right?
Thanks for putting everything in perspective. Hydrolators.
I'm there for you. So it's not a bad film, actually. It's got the Lion King characters, so there's Pumbaa, Timon, and Simba, and there's an ecology message in the film where Pumbaa and Timon want to build Hakuna Matata. What is it? Hakuna Matata Resort
Something
and Spa.
Yeah.
Spa and Resort, I think.
Spa and Resort. Yeah. So they're damming up the river, trying to make a lake for it, and of course Simba's there trying to give them lessons on what happens when you abuse the earth and stuff. And it runs about 15 minutes long. Some people find it a little bit preachy.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. It maybe runs a couple minutes longer than it could, but not bad overall. The animation's very crisp, very clear, very, very bright. So it's got the same sort of spirit as the Lion King movie. Overall, it's not bad.
I think Timon and Pumbaa are pretty funny in it, kind of like saying, I think, what everyone in the audience is kind of thinking, and Simba, I don't know, he does, the character, whoever did the character work in the Lion King movies obviously was not consulted in this attraction, because Simba just comes off as like your
the holier than thou.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, you guys are like, he's very overbearing, as I like to call it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But that's what happens. What happens in the film is that he becomes, head of what's the name of that rock? Pride Rock.
Pride Rock. Yeah.
All of a sudden he's dad or whatever. So
he becomes his father. God, let's hope that never happens.
I'm your father.
Where's Noel? We can throw in the right soundtrack there.
Let's move on to Ellen's Energy Adventure.
I really like it. I know there was the whole controversy thing when she came out on the show.
Right.
But I really like the pre-show. I like a whole lot better than the ride. She's funny.
Yes.
The movie with Bill Nye the Science Guy and Alex Trebek is hysterical. That part of the ride is very, very good. I still think the dinosaur stuff is a little lame.
Oh yeah,
especially,
they were just. I mean, the attraction before had dinosaurs in it before Ellen was put into this attraction, and
right.
I really think that the people at Disney were just like, well, the dinosaurs are too expensive to take down. Let's work them into this story.
Yeah, that's right. So if they ever replace it, they'll replace Ellen, not the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs will they have their own union. They can't be replaced.
Good way of putting it.
It's
but
reunion.
It's much. I mean, when they did when they did change it though, because I can remember before they changed it, the last time I had gone on that attraction, I actually fell asleep.
Oh yeah,
and,
who hasn't fallen asleep? Jeez.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's more entertaining. And Matt, remember how often we've talked about how Epcot at one point was losing everybody because it was being too educational, and you want it to be entertaining. Sure, they want to get a message across, but they really needed to do something to make it a little bit more entertaining and not as boring as it started out.
The good thing too about Ellen's Energy Adventure is there's rarely a wait for it. I mean, the thing holds 500-600 people at a time, so you're rarely going to wait more than one show cycle to get in. That's really not bad at all.
Yeah, the wait for this attraction kind of disappeared when Test Track and Mission Space and all those other Soarin' came onto the scene. I mean, now it's like the Star Tours of Epcot almost. You know,
a lot of it has to do with the capacity. Remember, this is one of the original Epcot attractions, so they engineered the capacity for this thing to be humongous.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so one of the throwbacks. Yeah, I really like it a lot though. The background music is very peppy too.
Yeah, I like the background music they play on Mouse World Radio a lot.
Remember the old Energy You Make the World Go Round song?
Ugh, thank God that has gone along with the World Motion song.
You are profound. Make the world go round and round. I mean, what else is going to rhyme with profound but round? I mean, come on.
Well, the next attraction, I think, is arguably, the worst of the 3D movies, relatively speaking, of all in Walt Disney World, and that's Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Yeah.
I think it's not to say that it's a terrible attraction by any means, but in terms of all the 3D movies you can find on Walt Disney World property, I would rank this one last, just relatively speaking.
Tough to say. You're thinking that of Muppet Vision, right? That's the two worst? Who am I talking to? What am I saying?
Well, no, I give Solar Magic would be one.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I would Muppet Vision 2. I would put...
You put Muppet Vision ahead of Tough to Be a Bug?
Yeah, Tough to Be a Bug. It's the same thing as Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. I put Tough to Be a Bug and Honey, I Shrunk the Audience neck and neck at the bottom. And Honey, I Shrunk the Audience is just more dated, so it gets the last place. Yeah,
that's the thing I don't like about... Yeah, I mean, I think it's in the bottom half. I think it's either 3 or 4, depending on what you feel about the... what's that zippy character in Muppet Vision?
Oh,
drags
Waldo.
The whole thing. Yeah, Waldo drags the whole thing down.
Yeah, you're right about that.
But it is dated, and, these days don't really know who Rick Moranis is, and they probably haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, it's not even on TV anymore. Like, it's not even a Saturday afternoon movie that you see, in between, ball games.
Right. How old is this movie now? It's got to be 15 years old, right?
Yeah, it's been out there for a while now.
It's like the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan in the Great Movie Ride. How many kids recognize that? Mommy, who is that? Yeah. Really?
Yeah, it's okay. And the good thing is there's really a wait for it. I'm surprised it still has Fast Pass, actually.
Really? It still has it?
It still has Fast Pass, yeah. But, I mean, rarely do you see it more than, 45 minutes in the future, the return times. You can frequently walk into the attraction. I think part of that is because the ride we're going to talk about next is so lame.
Well, what they should do for the Fast Pass machine at Honey, I Shrunk the Audience is just anytime someone actually asks for a Fast Pass, a little boy should come out and say, "Sucker!"
Really?
For your Fast Pass.
2 out of 3. Okay, reinsert your Fast Pass if you're really, really, really sure. But I mean, the film itself is okay. It's sort of zippy, but I think the technology is kind of dated. You see with PhilharMagic the kind of stuff that they can do, not only with the 3D film itself, but PhilharMagic combines smells and water effects, things like that. That I don't think it was quite up to par when they did Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Well, the next attraction is Journey into Imagination with Figment. The Stitch of Epcot, I believe.
Yeah, that's the way to say it too. I mean, there is never a wait. I've never seen a wait longer than 2 minutes for this attraction, and for good reason. I really prefer the first version of Journey into Imagination.
Me too.
And the second one apparently was so bad. For our listeners who don't know the history, right? This is the third incarnation of this attraction.
Right.
Yes.
The first one was beloved by everyone, but it was sort of like it was more get the artists to do the attraction like an art school version than actually ride Imagineering, right? So it was
a good acid trip, I think.
Right. It was sort of like the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour, but applied to Epcot. Oh God, we're dating ourselves. But so the first version, beloved by everyone, had a wonderful character. Figment had a snappy song, so of course they got rid of it. The second version was apparently so bad that what was it? Eisner said, get rid of it after like a year.
Yeah.
How long
I don't believe Figment wasn't even in the second one, was it?
Yeah, so of course, Figment was a popular character in Journey into Imagination. Second version of the attraction, he's not in it. Like, protests you wouldn't believe that made, when they got rid of Mr. Toad, made those protests pale in comparison. So the third revision, they bring him back, which is the version we have now, but it's not at all the sort of spunky, sort of acid trippy, to Matt's point, version that there are a couple interesting things in this attraction that are good. There's the upside down room. There's a room where you go in and in your imagination everything's upside down. That's sort of clever, even though you've probably seen it done in a million other places. It wasn't bad. The thing that bugs me about it is, Disney went through this stretch when they did attractions like Tough to Be a Bug is one, where they find humor in flatulence. And it's just such a cheap way to get a gag that you get a laugh that, and really Disney should not be doing that. I blame Shrek actually for all of that, but Disney could do so much better.
No, the flatulence jokes, it's really talking about dating yourself. I mean, it's those jokes were barely funny about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about the attraction is they've got the space and they've got sort of the visual elements to do a better job. So if they do rehab the attraction, I think they could do better. But they need to bring Dreamfinder back. Dreamfinder was the guy in the original version of the attraction. You can hear his audio on Mouse World Radio. It was just a better attraction than this one, because they've got who's the guy now?
Oh, the guy from our other favorite attraction, Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Yeah, the sort of crazy scientist guy. He's okay, but he's sort of typecast now.
Yeah.
Like Bela Lugosi could never get anything other than the vampire parts, right? And he's never going to play like the romantic lead.
Right.
This guy's never going to be anything other than the wacky scientist.
Dr. Nigel Channing.
Channing, right? Exactly.
The next attraction is Living with the Land, Len's favorite attraction in all of Walt Disney World.
Love it. Love it, love it. But go ahead. Tell everyone how much you love it first, and then I'll tell everyone how much I love it.
I actually do love it.
I think it's
because
great.
I've been a gardener in the past. Every time I go in there, it's like there's something new, and it's just amazing to see how they grow the plants and the huge. I'm trying to think what I saw that was huge. They grow these huge lemons and it's just that the way that they do the hydroponics and stuff, I really enjoy it. It's a nice, quiet, attraction to get out, and because not too many people, the line is not usually long, and I think it's a nice, peaceful, restful, educational but entertaining attraction.
I think it's for our listeners who haven't been on it before, it's a boat ride through the greenhouses and farms inside the land pavilion. And the first half, you sort of go through scenes with audio animatronic figures that show you the American farm circa 1900, so let's say very early part of the 20th century. And you learn about the environment there. You learn about the environment of, let's say, rainforests. And it's really well done. In the rainforest, it's immersive. There's rain coming down around you. There's smells. There's good visual cues. It sort of shows you about conservation and taking care of the land. The second half of the ride is a tour through the greenhouses, and it's really impressive because of the scale that they do these things on. So they've got an indoor greenhouse with thousands of plants. They've got the world's largest tomato plant there. They've got these innovative ways of growing plants vertically. So instead of using soil, they've got ways where they're stacking plants on trellises and watering them sort of from behind with nutrients soaked in the water. So rather than having to water like on a whole acre's worth of land if these things were planted in the soil, they're actually just watering the roots, concentrating the nutrients on the roots, thereby saving water and also saving space. The thing I'm trying to figure out is whether any of this stuff has ever been adopted commercially based on what they found in Epcot. But I'm not sure about that. But here's one thing. A lot of parents are concerned that the ride would not be appealing to their kids. But when we took my daughter on it, one of the cool things we did was, as we got to the second half of the ride, where we're actually going through the greenhouses, we had my daughter look for foods that were growing in the greenhouse that she'd eaten before. So, for example, they've got cocoa plants, and they mentioned that chocolate comes from cocoa. So we had my daughter look for cocoa plants, or bananas, or tomatoes. She's eaten tomatoes before, rice, things like that. That makes the trip much more interesting and relevant for kids because they can associate the food that they eat with how the plants grow in the wild. Like I'm sure my daughter thought, that stuff just comes from the grocery store. You can actually point to the plants in the ground and say, "See, that's what a rice plant looks like," or something like that. So that makes it much more relevant. One more thing, as you're going past the fish farm where they show the tilapia and the bass and the alligators and everything, apparently it's inappropriate to point to everything and go, them's good eating. So don't do that. Them's good eating.
The next attraction is Mission Space.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's sort of a reflexive thing.
I think this attraction probably gets an unfair knock. I mean, what?
Other than the fact that 2 people died after riding it, yeah. I mean, just a completely unfair knock. Although, to be fair, there was no, their deaths were never really associated with the attraction. It was just some other health stuff.
Right, and of course they didn't actually die on the attraction when they died at the hospital. No one dies at Walt Disney World.
Yeah, if you say so. I'd like to see the coroner report on that first, but
they are perhaps dead in the hospital.
Well, that's where the paperwork was signed anyway. That's our story. We're sticking to it.
Right.
The idea is that you're on a flight to Mars, right? And you're strapped into this centrifuge. So, I guess from the outside, it looks like one of those NASA training films from the 60s. You see the one where the guy is strapped onto this, essentially an aluminum chair, and he's spun around at 300 RPM. His cheeks are flapping in the wind. He's got the goggles on, and he looks like he'd rather be anywhere but where he's at.
Right.
That's essentially you in this attraction, but with better video.
I like it for what it's worth. I mean, it hasn't killed me yet, so knock on wood. But I think assuming you don't die from it, it's a decent attraction.
Assuming it doesn't kill you, it's probably a passable attraction.
No, really, to be honest, the 2 people who have died had conditions.
Yeah, pre-existing conditions.
So it wasn't like healthy people went on this and fell out of the simulator.
No, and the interesting thing too is that Disney's got to warn you. I counted no fewer than 7 warnings about if you've got heart problems or back problems or and anything more significant than an ingrown toenail, they tell you don't ride the ride.
Yep.
So, that being said, how many times have you been on it, Matt?
I would say at least 12 times.
You ever get sick on it?
The first time it was a little weird because you're used to Disney World attractions, looking at your friends, seeing how they're doing, and really if you keep your eyes straight ahead and just, focus on the attraction, it was fine. I felt myself a little queasy, but even the second time around, I was totally fine after that. So really, no problems at all for me.
Yeah, we actually talked to a NASA astronaut. I told you about this, right? We actually called NASA after we went on it the first time to try and figure out why we kept getting sick and what we could do about it. But NASA wasn't going to tell us anything remotely resembling medical advice because they knew we would work for the guy. So I actually had a friend of a friend who used to date a NASA astronaut. So I was able to get his phone number, and he spoke to me and gave us a couple of neat tips for how NASA astronauts supposedly keep from launching their Cheerios on these kinds of things. And what he said was part of the problem might be low blood sugar. So our NASA astronaut said to eat a decent meal, an hour or two before you go on to make sure your blood level's high. And then a trick that some astronauts use apparently is to either chew gum or keep a mint in your mouth during the ride. And I'm not sure if he thinks it just keeps your mind off of what's going on when you're able to fool with the mint or the gum in your mouth.
Right.
But he said it works. He said also avoid milk and tomatoes because they're really unpleasant coming back up. And the way he said it, it was like he knew that they were really unpleasant. And he's like, "Oh, whatever you do, man. no tomatoes, no milk."
Oh, okay.
So, but don't forget, it's not bad. Don't forget, there's the no spin version of the O'Reilly Factor version of the ride coming in in
summer, I think, right?
Well, yeah. So apparently the centrifuges will be stationary. So you'll just sit there, strapped into the equivalent of an airline toilet, and watch a small video, right?
And about as equally as amusing.
Exactly. So I mean, you're really confined in that space, right? So if you're claustrophobic at all, don't go on it.
The next attraction is Soarin'. We really talked about this back in episode 4. We kind of went over the entire attraction. And I'll put a link in the show notes for our listeners to go back and listen to it about our reactions to that. Has anyone's opinion changed on Soarin'?
Nope. I went on it 3 times in an hour a couple of days ago, and it's still very. It's a gentle thrill ride. It's a tweener. It's a thrill ride, but it's a very gentle thrill ride. I mean, but if you ride it 3 times in a row, you're going to start doing things like counting the hot air balloons, counting the jets, counting the skiers. I mean,
right.
I think it's one of those attractions where you can take 2 in a row, but I think then you got to move on. It's continuing to draw the crowds. I believe that to me it looks like it's the number 1 attraction in Epcot. And I think Test Track may be number 2, and maybe Mission Space may be a distant 3 right now.
Well, let's move on to Spaceship Earth then. The attraction that somehow still remains here. Maybe
it's a great attraction.
Talk about dated attraction.
Miraculous. No, it's the history of communication. How can it be dated?
It's dated. It makes. I mean, the end part. It reminds me a lot of. It's like the Carousel of Progress of Epcot. I mean, obviously the stuff from the past is not dated. I mean, that's stuff that's happened. But what the future will bring, and they have like things that are very much here today. And whereas when Spaceship Earth first launched, obviously it was a lot more exciting, and they had a lot more futuristic elements to it. Wow, so what's communication going to bring us? And
all right, so walk our listeners through the attraction. What's the theme? The theme is the history of communication. It's
right.
Sponsored by.
It's not AT&T anymore. It
used to be AT&T. Now it's
Siemens.
Because when you think communication, you think Siemens.
Of course.
So you start off in caveman days, with caveman.
Painting.
I guess learning or creating the first rudimentary languages, and you see cave paintings. And there's actually the good thing about this attraction that I like is you can smell things. So like when you're in the cave, there's a fire burning. You can smell the sulfur from the fire.
Right, the Rome scene also.
The Rome scene, yeah. There's a scene in where it talks about the roads that Roman Empire had made, and that how the roads had increased communication. Talking about papyrus and hieroglyphics, which are the first written alphabet, enabling communication as well. It goes through the Dark Ages. What's right after the Dark Ages? Oh, interesting tidbit about the Dark Ages. In the Greek scene during the right before the Dark Ages, 2 of the characters animatronics are leftover animatronics from the Hall of Presidents.
Yeah.
One of them is William Howard
Ulysses
Taft.
S. Grant. Is another one Ulysses S. Grant?
Yeah, and William Howard Taft, yeah. But they've got Greek masks on, so it's really funny.
That's really good.
It's not that anyone would be able to pick them out of a lineup or anything. The interesting thing about this, two things. One is you get to the point where they're talking about communication in the 20th century, and inevitably, Disney could not resist showing their own films in the history of communication there. So, yeah, you see this
Snow White
Under the Sea and
Snow White. Snow White has definitely revolutionized communication. Come on.
Exactly. I mean,
we all whistle while we work, so you know.
Yeah, I think we when we think about the 1940s, we think about really two things: Hedy Lamarr and inventing cell phone service, and Dopey and the Snow White revolutionizing color cartoon. Quick question: who's playing football? What are the two teams playing football on the screens? On the left-hand side, right after you get to...
I'll bet one, knowing Len, I bet one is the Steelers.
No, one is not the Steelers.
Oh, wow. Then I don't know why you're bringing up this trivia, then. I thought this was going to
Packers and the Lions? I don't know.
No, it's Cleveland. I know one of them is Cleveland. The other team, I believe, is the Colts. But the clip showed Jim Brown essentially running all over. I think it is the Colts over and over and over again, endlessly, just like he did during the... I don't know, it's the highlight for me of the attraction. It gets to the end of the attraction, and, I mean, to Matt's point, it's supposed to be like, you know, the present and the future of communication, but, again, it's one of those things where you can't show the future without having to update it, like, every 6 months. Because the stuff that they're looking at, you know, automatic language translation and video conferencing, like, we got that now. I mean, we're doing the podcast is essentially what we're doing, you know, and it just doesn't. None of it's inspiring. So, but you see, they actually stepped away from that at the very end. Now it's like these sort of dioramas of cities, and they've got these flashing LED lights, and that's supposed to represent communication, but it just sort of. They're trying to dazzle you with, like, you know, LEDs and light effects rather than actually postulating on what the future might hold for communication.
Yeah. The next attraction is Test Track, assuming it's open and not broken. It's a good. I think the problem. I think it was good the first couple times, but really, if you want to experience Test Track, go home, drive on the highway, stick your head out the window. You've done Test Track.
Yeah.
And the best part is the little loop, and it's over pretty quickly. And like I said, I mean, you know, rent a convertible for the weekend, and you can do the exact same thing. I don't know. I mean, it's not a bad attraction, but I'm not that impressed by it. I don't find it as an attraction that I find myself always making sure that I do.
It's one of those things when I walk through the queue, and they're showing how they test the individual components of a car, like how they test the doors opening and closing so many times, and how they ensure that the springs in the seats are reliable. I always walk through and I think, I wonder what Toyota does. Because, I mean, sometime either this year or very early next year, Toyota will become the largest car maker in the world. And, you know, they got that way, obviously, for their reputation for quality. And I just wonder, it's like, if Toyota did this attraction, what would be different about it?
That's a good question.
I don't, you know, the ride itself, I think the exhibits are much more interesting than the actual ride. Just to Matt's point, if you've got a teenager and you've got an open road, you'll definitely have more thrills by letting the teenager behind the wheel, letting them drive you at 160 miles an hour. I think with the windows down, I think you'll be much more scared than on this attraction. And I also think you might have a better chance of actually seeing the airbags deploy. But it's just the ride itself is just okay. I think they could have done a little bit more with the exhibits. It's all right.
Yeah.
Scopa?
Yeah, I've ridden it once or twice, and it's like, it just doesn't draw me, you know. And I think it's because when I think of an attraction in Disney World, I think of something that's going to tell me a story, and it really doesn't tell me a story.
Yeah, that's a good point, because they don't really tie it all together. That's actually a good observation. You know, they've got all the mechanical stuff. You know, again, this is how we test the springs. This is how we test the shocks. This is how we do the environmental test. But there's really not a compelling. Yeah, there's not really a compelling narrative. I mean, the best part of it is you go fast, but you probably went that fast in the parking lot.
If I had designed that attraction, I would have designed it so that there would be a building blocks kind of a theme as you go through the entire attraction. So it's entertaining, it's fun, but at the end you say, okay, this is how we put it all together. So they didn't do that. So I think that's always been a little bit of a problem for me.
And lastly is Turtle Talk with Crush. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is the best attraction at Epcot.
Oh, it's not crazy now, but it's good.
I'm going to say it's the best attraction.
What about the rest of the living seas? That's not impressive?
Even without the hydrolators, Matt?
The hydrolators were great. They brought you to places I'd never been before.
Yeah. For our first-time listeners, apparently it was only like 10 episodes ago that Matt finally realized that the hydrolators, the elevators in the living seas, don't actually move.
They go somewhere. It's beyond our own understanding. Mankind wasn't meant to understand how hydrolators work, okay?
You never enter the same hydrolator twice. I understand.
But what I like about Turtle Talk with Crush, it's everything that any new attraction should be. It should have a rewrite ability. There is never the same show twice.
That's right.
They have the thing with the whale, but other than that, it's very much different. It's very entertaining on two levels. It entertains kids. Any kid will love this thing. But I think they have the same jokes work for adults.
Right.
And it's just, I think because of that, really the only problem with it, I think, is that its capacity is next to nothing. I think they really meant for this not to be very popular, and I don't think they anticipated the popularity that it enjoys.
Gilbo, why don't you describe the attraction for our listeners, because I think some people haven't seen it.
Basically, you're in this small theater, and at the front of the theater there is a screen. I guess it's a screen, and it looks like you're underwater. And the audience is looking at the screen, and they usually bring the small children up front. And we soon see Crush coming up, and Crush the Turtle, and the technology is such that there is a cast member who is operating the voice, and the image that we see is Crush interacting with the children up front, actually looking at them and talking to them. Hey, here's this little fellow with a red shirt. What's your name? And I think that is basically what is the big draw to this attraction. It's personal. Like Matt says, you never get the same show twice. It's bringing the kids closer to the characters, and I think that's why it works. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. It's almost like they've taken the talking trash can in Tomorrowland, and they've upgraded it to today's technology.
It's really neat because the kids can ask questions of Crush, and Crush will answer them. And behind the scenes, they've got a ton of computing power, in addition to a cast member backstage who can talk like Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Dude, totally. Anyway, the interesting thing is that as the cast member is talking, again, there's a ton of computing power going on in the background because Crush's mouth will move and his lips will form the right shapes for the words that he's saying. So it does look like he's talking, and he's doing it in real time. So that they've got more than a laptop back there working out the graphics on this computer screen.
But he's also looking at the child.
Yeah, he's actually bouncing around the screen, and he'll get right in front of the kid that's asking the question. So it's pretty. The technology is pretty amazing. The questions themselves are pretty tame. It's the kids tend to ask, "What do you eat? Do you swim a lot? Do you like to swim? Do you like the beach?" Stuff like that. There are, but every once in a while you get the occasional funny question or funny response that makes it worthwhile. The interesting thing on this is originally when we first saw it, there's enough seating in there for about 80, maybe 90 people. But lately, because of the demand for the show, it's standing room only. So instead of just allowing enough people in to sit down, they'll actually line them up along the sides and along the back of the theater, and I think they could probably fit like 150 or so.
That much? Wow.
120, 150, somewhere in there. I mean, they really do pack them in, and the reason is that almost immediately after the attraction started, the wait times grew from like 10 minutes to, it's not uncommon to see an hour-long wait.
Yeah.
Now, so that's for an attraction that's buried in the middle of the living seas, which is under rehab right now. An hour-long wait's pretty long.
Well, that's it for us today. This has been a very long episode of episode number 97. Walt Disney World Today. If you want to find older
very long episode of episode 97.
Yeah, very long.
There's only one of those, but go ahead.
My English is great today. You want to find older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, visit the Walt Disney World Today website at wdwtoday.com. You can also email us at questions@wdwtoday.com, or line test on Mike Scopa and Mike Newell. I'm Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.